Salem's mail, literally when I was on this boat in Thailand, Koh Tao. And I must say it's really difficult to concentrate on a conference in September if you're in this environment. Because what I want to do is this. This is me. It's a picture, yeah. I mean, Hans, do you miss being no longer in the military? No, not at all. Not at all. My daughter made this picture. That's my daughter. At the start of the dive. That's the only time in life she listens to me, when we're diving together, when I'm guiding her. But before this happened, a lot of other things have to happen. A lot of other things should happen. You have to buy equipment. The equipment has to get to Thailand. You need a boat. You need a compressor. You need buoyancy control devices. And you need good staff. And this picture is from 3 years ago, when we were working with 12 people at the dive shop on Koh Tao in Thailand. This year there were only 6 people, and at any time at least one of them was ill because he had to work so hard. And maybe it's a daft metaphor. This is what you want. Happy daughter. You know, happy wife, happy life, but with the daughter it's even worse. It's even worse. She was happy. And on a totally different thing, I said a daft metaphor, but this is happening in Europe.
Єсть, нахуй! Оце красиво було! Диви, нахуй! Як це да! Оце нахуй! Добрий день, блядь, сука! Що там, зетка?
I'm glad I don't understand it, what he's saying. But basically, it's the same thing as my daughter jumping in the water to start her dive. Is how do we make sure that we can provide the war? And you need men for that, and women. And those are the most important battle systems. But we need a lot more. We need a lot more. Factories to produce these weapons, warehouses, infrastructure. We need trucks, trains, planes, roads, railroads. We need ships. And basically, that's what I like to talk about today with this panel. Explore what we need and what we might need more to make sure that we're able not only to conduct the war, but win a war and ultimately prevent the war. So that's the panel. And this is my panel, and I would like to start with giving everybody the opportunity to introduce themselves with a couple of sentences. And Adrian, may I give you the floor? Oh, sorry. Yeah,
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's an honor to be here today, talking to such an audience full of know-how. I'm not a military guy. I'm a construction guy and an IT guy at the same time. So a challenge to speak at such a conference. My fellow panelists today here, gurus in defense strategies at least. So they have to cope with my speech that will be a beginning into military actions. However, we're a construction company, and construction companies usually do well in a wartime. So, dear Excellencies, distinguished guests, I'm honored to be here today. I'll have the chance to speak at this military conference in a panel that talks about infrastructure, so quite easy to put construction next to it. So you may wonder what we are actually doing here. I have Cătălin here with me, another construction company. And you may say we would like to actually benefit of a window that somebody else created for us. We haven't created, somebody else created for us. And I have carefully chosen that word, us. Because we at Concelex, we do believe that we all have to stand united in front of the threats that are to our doorstep. And that all, we strongly believe, it has to include construction companies. Now, what happens if I press here, nothing?
Yeah, we decided not to do any more presentations, so...
Well,
So you got... yeah, we tried to get away with, done away with all these presentations. They are available online. But we don't do anymore. We just want to talk. Yeah. So you're in construction. What is your main concern at the moment?
Once again, please.
Your main concern being in construction.
Well, my main concern is actually when I started to be close to the new strategy center, and thank you for inviting me here, I was starting to read more about infrastructure during the war times. And I have realized, and later on I was reading what General HODGES here wrote lately, that infrastructure and mobility are linked together. And infrastructure in this country is not as it should be. So my main concern would be if somebody attacks us as a nation, how long we would be there holding the line before everything else comes from the West. General HODGES said it loud yesterday that everything would come from the West, troops, ammunition. Ben, we will not be ready for that.
Ben, you were mentioned from a kinetic point of view, given your old job, what do you think about infrastructure?
Well, for deterrence to be effective, we have to demonstrate the capability and the will to use capability to defeat any opponent. And so the Russians would have to believe that we can move as fast or faster than them with force that could destroy their force. That's for deterrence. And that means for Romania specifically, but in and around the Black Sea region, we've got to be able to move heavy equipment, ammunition, people, and all the rest of the logistics, fuel, all the stuff that's heavy, hard to move. It's got to be able to cross international borders. And the infrastructure, the bridges, the tunnels, the ports have to be able to handle it. And to be candid, this wonderful country of Romania is not ready to do that.
We'll get back to that. And we also will get back to vulnerability. Yesterday night we saw the Minister of Defense of Ukraine speaking via video conference, and he had a wonderful T-shirt on with Saint HIMARS. I didn't know there was a saint, but I'm not that well that well known in the Eastern Church, but Saint HIMARS. So infrastructure is also about vulnerability. I'll get back to that. I won't let you introduce yourself anymore because you've been all over this conference, General. I think you are well known, and if you haven't read the book yet, do it because it's an excellent book. Cătălin.
Hi. So I'm Cătălin PODARU. I'm the general manager of Leviatan Design and UBT Construction, which are two companies, I say, mainly involved in defense infrastructure. So we're glad to be here because, in my opinion, last year we speak about infrastructure as deterrence. I believe this year the military infrastructure is critical for an imminent threat that can happen anytime. And although we have to build roads and bridges, I think that moreover we have to be ready to use our capabilities and weapons that we are buying at the moment and want to buy in the future. But at this stage we need facilities to operate, maintain, and why not accommodate all the troops that are coming to Romania. And I think this is a real issue that we have to take in consideration. I hope this discussion will be about, let's say, the limitation of this, what's happening at this time, because I believe in this moment everybody is treating this aspect of critical military infrastructure as a need in peacetime, and we are not really in peacetime today. And maybe we can approach what General HODGES recommended in his book, that we should take seriously to have a strategic partnership between public and private sector, because in my opinion, and maybe we'll discuss further about this, we've seen that during the COVID period, actually the companies, especially the national located companies, became capabilities for the states to handle all the struggles and the crisis. So maybe you can develop upon that.
I think we certainly will discuss that later on. You're ex-military, Cătălin. What is the best thing you took from the military into your civilian life and your current job?
I believe that the best thing that I took is the understanding how military works. But moreover, I believe that the military has the oldest and more mature organizational culture in the world. So I think this is what I took from that.
Yeah, and that's great. And we both know it works. But it's also a risk, because if the machine bureaucracy was invented somewhere, it was in the military. We'll get back to that. We'll get back to that. Roland.
Yeah, thank you very much. Roland Brine, I'm working for Damen Naval as a commercial director. Damen is a family-owned Dutch shipbuilding company established in 1927. I'm not going to the whole history, don't be afraid. But what I would like to point out here is that we're as much Dutch as we are Romanian. We have 35 operations worldwide, where 2 of our biggest operations are in Romania. We have the yard the yard in Galați, where we build the most complex and big ships. And quite recently, 2018, we acquired a share in the yard that we co-own with the Romanian government on the Black Sea. Looking at this topic of this session here, infrastructure, I think that, well, there is infrastructure, but moreover, I think it's important to highlight the growth that we have here, also in technology. Yesterday also, during a few panels, I heard, well, General Petrescu, but also the minister said technological advantage is important. That's what we've grown here, and I'm proud to say that ships for the Netherlands, the Royal Netherlands Navy, are built here and designed here.
Yeah, and before anybody starts to think, what's the relationship of Hans Damen with the shipyard? The joke I normally made is that he threw me out of the family when I chose for the army and not the navy. But we're totally not related, so I'm not his boss. Nor is my family. Roland, you mentioned the Dutch Navy. There is a warm relationship for over 400 years, I might say, between the Royal Navy in the Netherlands and the shipbuilding building industry. Could you tell a bit about that?
Yes, we like to call that the golden ecosystem. It's basically a triangle where defense, industry, and knowledge institutes cooperate. What it actually means is that in this way we're able to accelerate programs, which is quite essential at this time. Basically, if we start a new program, for example, building a new frigate, those 3 institutes come together. So it's really a cooperation between, again, defense, in this case, Navy, industry, where Damen plays a vital role, and knowledge institutes like TNO and the Marin Institute. And again, the emphasis is on technological advantage and acceleration of those programs.
Yeah, and I remember that I used to look at that cooperation and I was a bit jealous. And I was wondering, do we really need naval engineers working together with civilian industry on a new ship? I'm not anymore, because I see the advantages, and I believe that's what you alluded to, Cătălin, and also what Ben said yesterday, day before yesterday. The whole of nation approach, we need that symbiosis between civilian companies and the military MODs. How do you see that, Ben?
So actually, things that improve military logistics and mobility are not exclusive from things that help local economy. What we need, when I say we, I'm talking about the United States military, but also NATO, we need a seaport and airport in Romania that enables rapid transfer of cargo, massive fuel storage capacity, ammunition storage capacity, networks of river, rail, highways that move to and from Constanta and the airport, Mikhail Kogălniceanu Airport, now you know why Americans call it MK, to get in and out of there. So, of course, Romanian industry needs that. Europe needs that. So if you think of Constanta and MK International Airport as one entity, I mean, that would become the economic engine almost for the Black Sea region. But that means that the government, working with the EU and other relevant international agencies, have got to invest in Constanta to improve multimodal platforms where you can move a lot of stuff, fuel, gas, ammunition, heavy machinery, heavy equipment, as well as grain and other product. That requires investment, and Constanta is not yet up to that task to be able to deliver. Fuel storage, I think, is probably maxed out right now, so there's need for more fuel storage. And of course, if you're talking about ammunition, you've got to have a special platform where in case there is an accident, it doesn't destroy everything else. So that's an important investment as well. Last point, of course, the U.S. has still selected MK as our place, hub for logistics and operations in the Black Sea region. So the location is there, you can feel the potential is there, but the rail and highway, the bridges over the Danube, there's not enough yet to make us feel really confident about our ability to deter Russian Federation forces.
In the Netherlands, our Air Force has now a cooperation with the Americans. The central warehouse for the Joint Strike Fighter in Europe is going to be in the Netherlands. It's still the Air Force warehouse, but they are going to use it together. Also the production facilities, the airfield where that warehouse is, also gives room to firms. I've stolen that idea when I was still in the military, Director of Support of the Army, and we started a project to design, to build, and to operate our new warehouse together with industry. And the candidate has been chosen 3 months ago, and they are now starting to build it. Adrian, would that also be a possibility in Romania? Do you see Romanian government working together, exploiting together with industry, building a warehouse, exploiting a warehouse, something like that?
Well, I think it is. I will add more to what General HODGES here said. This infrastructure we are all blaming, it has to come to reality fast, and there are ways of having that fast. I agree with what Ben says. I'm the vice chair of the board of directors in Mikhail Kogălniceanu, the civilian airport. And this is exactly what Dan says. There is small chance today of the military and Council of Constanța working together to bring that fast because the potential is there. Bridges are not ready. Highway is 20 kilometers away. A connector should be built. Sorry. But what we are calling dual infrastructure, what Dan calls us dual infrastructure projects, are possible. And my wake-up call, I have heard yesterday the wake-up call that the Russian war has brought. My wake-up call to the authorities will be, let's have a simplified procedure for public acquisition in military projects. That will be essentially a dual infrastructure project. I know, Cătălin, will agree with me, we cannot wait hundreds of days. They cannot wait hundreds of days for an auction to be finalized. I mean, you go there, you tender, you wait, I don't know how long, then contestation, we are a fan of that, happens. So I would actually urge the government. They have to hear that we are passing a time when we need speed. It's part of the deterrence. I have learned that from Dan the other day. we need to move fast. So the answer to the question will be, yes, it's possible. They will need to make something, and that will be increase the speed of these tenders being organized and awarded eventually. Because we have contractors in the country. Cătălin can give you an example. We know how to build it.
Yeah, of course, I get back to Cătălin now because he was so enthusiastic about the organization of the Army and the Ministry of Defense. And believe me, what happens in your country happens in every country, in every military. And some of the military are a bit more bureaucratic than others. I won't mention any nations, but I've got examples if we have a beer at night tonight. What is withholding that cooperation?
Actually, I believe that this cooperation exists. Fortunately, we have good examples that when you have people motivated, and actually we've done it and we're still doing it. We have different facilities from hangars. Even now, Mr. Jacob is here. We succeeded in this hard year to move very fast with the Corp in CVU, and this is an example. So this cooperation exists, but of course, as Adrian said, I believe that from our perspective, there is more to be done. We came front. We actually did inside our organization, we use technology, very fluid processes, in order to procure the material with all these problems that we have with the supply chain, prices going up every month, the problem with personnel. But even though we succeeded, because we said, okay, until we ask somebody else to do something, let's see how we do. So in this respect, I believe the MOD and even the government moved very, very fast this year. They released laws in acquisition that adapted very fast. I haven't seen it in the future. So we have this example of good cooperation and people involved that we can succeed to implement a project much faster. And you said something about this happening in every country. I think that's a good thing for us. As it was written in the book, we have the advantage that we don't have to discover all by ourselves, so we can talk with you and experts from other countries and see what was the solution there. So I believe that in this moment, as Adrian also mentioned, there would be a good solution to implement some special acquisition modification in respect to military infrastructure to be more fast about it. Also, maybe not change the legislation. This also takes a lot of time, but if maybe we can import the model of some contracts. For example, I know that here should have been somebody from the Corps of Engineers. So they do it all over the world. They have multi-annual award contracts with specific companies that has a good historic, so they can move very fast in implementing a requirement. So I think that with a little bit of involvement in discussion, cooperation between the government and the companies, we can find easy solution to really deliver fast. And moreover, I believe that, and this is a recommendation, that the company has the ability, so they have the ability to implement some technology faster. I would be glad if the MOD would move in that direction in terms of papers, bureaucracy, because this technology is not only a buzzword. It has some simple but impactful uses in working together and building and getting together all the stakeholders, assuring that we have the right specs when the facility is ready. Those who will operate it has everything they need inside it. And I will profit to raise up another issue that I think is all over the world. 2 months ago, I was reading an article that General Milley was very worried that a lot of the officers are quitting the army, so he proposed raises in salaries in order to overcome this lack of personnel. I believe also in this domain, especially infrastructure, but in general in acquisition, we should have better paid people, because actually they have a huge responsibility. There are millions or hundreds of millions in euro today in investments, but most of the people are less, I don't know.
But is it only money? Because you spoke a lot about rules, and I'm not sure whether there are lawyers here in the audience, acquisition lawyers.
Lawyers?
No, so I can say all kind of nasty thing about lawyers. Yeah, in the end, you need them for the contract. But the silly thing is, if something goes wrong in that corporation, lawyers start to read the contract and see how they can get money from the other party. And what I always say, if I have a problem, if I had a problem with supplier, I wouldn't call one of my lawyers, great guys and girls by the way, but I would call the director of the company and speak to him. And another remark about money. Yeah, I'm always in favor of paying the military more. It's even good for my pension, so yeah, do that. But the real question is, are we military in the army? Are we doing our service for money or not? And I tend not to think so.
So I have my own theory. It will be, let's say, a bit hypocritical to say the money doesn't count, but it's like the Maslow pyramid. So after you don't worry about your basics, your family, your children education, the higher values appear. So I believe that in general, in a peaceful society, this is the normal way. Backwards, when we see what's happened in Ukraine, in crisis situation, I don't think that money is the issue. So, because we had a lot of discussion in Romania, what will we do in case of a conflict in Romania? Will we leave? Will we fight? But I think that the Ukrainian example shows that most of the people transform this crisis situation, and the core values of the people come to the surface, and they are fighting for 6 months. So.
Is it also not about responsibility? What we had in the Netherlands, when people came back from Afghanistan, if you have young lieutenants, they would have a huge responsibility. They would go out of the camp, maybe with a platoon, but there wasn't a real platoon, there was their own platoon, but there was 65 people. They had F-16s, Apaches on the line, local translators, special forces around them. And they had to deal with that. It was their responsibility, and the decisions they made had impact. And then you come back to the Netherlands, and if you want to buy a new curtain, you need 10 different signatures. And we've seen that one of the reasons that young military leave the service is the fact that once they're back in the Netherlands, they don't get any responsibility at all. And since the Germans invented it, mission command, we've been preaching it, but are we really doing it, Ben?
Are we talking about infrastructure or?
Mission command. Is military mobility, is infrastructure, is supplying logistics, is that something we could deal with mission command? Or do we need a central steering on that one?
Well, I think our governments, Romania and others, can do things to incentivize initiative by businesses, by industry, by putting out the requirements. Say, we need transportation, cargo handling, we need the facilities, and then government can do things to incentivize this, make Romania more attractive for investment, for example. I mean, Cluj could be the IT capital of Eastern Europe. I mean, it already attracts a lot of people there. Can the government do more things so that young people say, I want to go there because there's a chance to really develop my skill and also make a nice income? And I think doing the same thing around Constanta and MK, incentivize. And of course, if you want big companies or entrepreneurs, up-and-coming people, to want to come invest and work, they've got to be confident that the laws, the legal processes are there to protect them, that there's transparency on all the finances, where the money goes, making it impossible for corruption or skimming or those kind of things to happen, and also to make sure that there is a labor force, attract young people. And so, by the way, before I would give a military a raise, I would give all my teachers a raise as well, because that's so necessary, I think, for having a good workforce. The fact that Romania is, I believe, is going to be welcomed into the Schengen is fantastic news. I hope it's going to finally happen. But that will not make the Port of Constanta any better. Okay, it'll only make it easier to cross the border into Romania, and it'll make it a little easier for me to fly from Frankfurt to Bucharest. But it's still going to take investment to take advantage of this opportunity. And I like Hans' point. Of course, what he's driving at is how do you unleash the talent of people? How do you set them free to use their talent and take risks, invest their money? And I think this is where government has an important role to play, and the parliament has a role to play. Enable people to do things and incentivize people to want to do those things.
Adrian, if the Romanian government had to change one thing for you to make your business better and to serve your nation and serve the government better, what would that be?
Well, I would say the answer would be twofold. The answer would be twofold. Number one, they would need to know what exactly we all have to focus on. Coming back again to what General HODGES did in his recent study, he says, guys, let's have an assessment. I mean, do we know exactly where to go? What would be the priority? What road would need to be reinforcement, or what bridge would need reinforcement? That would be similar with what Eisenhower did back in 1919. He was actually doing a trip, 3,000-mile trip from east to west of US. And later on, he turned that into a super project. He did the interstate. That was called defense as well. So the number one thing would be where to focus. So they will need to do that. Otherwise, they will do bits and pieces. And that will not ensure speed. That will not increase deterrence as everybody needs it. This will be one. And second, they will need to push hard on their legislative part. Make it more transparent. Make it faster. Digitalize them like hell, I would say. Otherwise, going there with a box of 1 square feet of documentation would not help the process. So I would push them to digitalize as much as possible, because that creates transparency as well.
And probably the third one, pay a bit faster, or...
Why not, yeah.
I worked for the Ministry of Health during the Corona crisis a couple of times in the Netherlands. And what I used to say when I was in the military, if one of the owners of a factory of business complained, I would say, yeah, we will pay, in the end we will pay. I found out, 7 months. Cătălin, same question for you. What should change? What should the Romanian government change in order for you to provide them with better services, with better work?
So I put on the first place to create a platform, let's say a setup, legislative setup, where decision maker, investors from representative from the acquisition position and stakeholders in the projects to be able to openly discuss with the companies before they even, let's say, initiate the procedure of an acquisition. this discussion, I believe, will be helpful for everyone because, as you mentioned everything, there is a, let's say, I don't know, phobia or reluctance on the governmental representatives to talk to private companies, not to be, let's say, misunderstood. So I think this is one of the most important. Have a secure place where we can talk and understand each other and maybe improve the requirements of the project. Of course, the second is have the digitalization and implementation of technology that actually can be a cure for or solution for many problems. The personal problem, the, I don't know, the time problem, and so on. So, but the first is communication.
Roland, context before contracts. Is there something to be learned maybe from the Netherlands or for your line of business, from your line of business?
In response to that question, I would like to also highlight what I've heard, because everything what I hear is true. Everything what I hear is true, and it all starts. But I don't want to point out to the government. It's vice versa. It comes two directions. If I look how we did this in the Netherlands, and even there it's far from perfect, but it all starts with trust. You mentioned contracts, lawyers, etc. In the old days, and that's what people say, in the old days, contracts were just a handshake and you start building a ship. I do understand that's impossible anymore, but what it boils down to is trust. If government and industry are working hand in hand, especially in these times, then they can accelerate. And then when that trust is there, the boundaries will disappear. Well, I don't think they will disappear, but they will become workable. If I can add to that, one other suggestion is cooperation should also mean that personnel from industry and defense work in each other's organizations. And I've seen that. I've seen really good examples of that in Germany, where I'm jealous about that. I would love to copy that to the Netherlands and here, where we learn from each other. We learn from each other's problems. We learn from each other's challenges, and that will help accelerate building infrastructure, building ships, etc.
If I can elaborate a little bit on that, on what Cătălin also said, he basically asked for a safe place to have those contacts. Context before contracts. You mentioned the German examples. We have also some good examples in the Netherlands. Air Force, where mechanics from the US industry work side by side with mechanics from the Air Force, and I stole that model right away. I mean, don't think of something better. Copy if you see something good. So, for instance, in the Netherlands we use armored vehicle Boxer, and our mechanics that are supposed to repair it if it breaks down, they help building it. So they would be posted to the factory for 3 months, and they would help build that vehicle. So if they would see it in 2 years' time, when it broke down, they knew exactly where everything was because they built it themselves. I've got 150 of these examples, and the question I got all the time from industry, yeah, but are you going to pay for that? No, I'm not paying for it because it's mutually beneficial for both sides. In the end, both sides profit because the industry also gets the experience of the military into their factory. And one funny story, we don't do that only with technicians. We had a program where we exchanged personnel with DSV, the logistics service provider. And their drivers came with us on an exercise and helped us doing logistics during the exercise. And the other way around, we put corporals into one of their warehouses. and they were given the task of order picking. Well, after 5 days, they were totally fed up what was happening. But the funny thing what was happening was that during the weekend, they wrote a plan for that warehouse, how they could improve the operation. And those are corporals. And the plan was implemented. So both sides can learn from each other. And yeah, the floor is open for any question or any comments you may have. So don't hesitate. Tell me who you are and what your question is.
Thank you. My name is Valentin Berca from Craiova. I have a question for Ben. Ben, what is your opinion regarding European Deterrence initiative of DOD? Could be increased the budget of this initiative to support military mobility infrastructure in Romania? For example, as in Poland, with this budget, build new bridges and railways. Thank you.
Yeah, the question, we have the European budget available to improve infrastructure. There has been a 5-year discussion in the European Union whether if you use civilian money to build civilian roads, are the military then also allowed to drive over them? Or if the minimum military requirements for a bridge are a bit higher because you need to send over a low loader over it, can we use that money? And basically what you're asking, I think you already gave the answer, but what's happening in Poland, money being put in infrastructure, to improve infrastructure, could that also happen in Romania? Or probably I should ask you, Ben, should that also happen in Romania? But that's rhetoric.
So, Val, good to see you. I would expect that, or I believe what I saw a study about 2 years ago, it said that if you overlay military requirements for improved infrastructure with EU's commercial projections, it's almost like 90% the same. So we're not talking about competing requirements. But I would imagine, as an American, not a member of the European Union, watching the EU and the relevant agencies would expect Romania to do a little bit more on its own first before it would come in to pay for additional infrastructure, unless there was obvious benefit for the rest of Europe as well. I'm a little out of my lane on that, so I couldn't speak specifically about that. But I think before we get there, or while we're waiting to get there, there's things that Romania can do with its neighbors. I mean, thinking strategically to create demand, Georgia is an obvious partner for Romania, so that if Georgia truly does become the portal between Europe and Eurasia that it should be, that the map would tell us that it logically would be, and they developed the port of Anaklia that's been talked about for so long, where you get a deep water port, then you've got ships coming directly across the Black Sea headed straight to Constanta or into Turkey or up into Odessa. You would benefit from that. But of course, the last thing the Russians want are a bunch of European countries investing in Georgia and in Anaklia, and unfortunately the Georgia Dream Party accommodates that. But this is the kind of thinking strategically that I'm talking about. I would also say, why do you still have Russia on the Danube River Commission? I mean, this is a leftover from when there was the Soviet Union. You still have a Russian member, and Russia is still one of the official languages for the Danube River Commission. Why is that? I mean, if we're thinking strategic, and they have no interest in the Danube River becoming the artery that it can be. And so I think through that, through Serbia, through Hungary a little bit, the Danube right now, when there's water in it, is really only for our grandparents on a cruise. So thinking strategically from Georgia all the way through all the Danube countries? Are we cooperating with each other? Are we cooperating with Turkey? Without Turkey, the Black Sea is just a great place for holiday. All right, so are we cooperating with Turkey for the kinds of cargo and the kinds of ships, the size of ships? So that's not a direct answer to your question, but before the EU should spend €1, these are the kind of things I think that Romania can be doing to help itself.
Yeah, and what's interesting is Turkey has asked to become a member of the PESCO project, Military Mobility. It took some time before the NATO nations, USA, Canada, and Norway were incorporated into the PESCO project. And I believe you just made the point, Ben, why it's necessary that Turkey also joins that PESCO project, not only for Georgia. Before I look a little bit back and follow the Danube, and yeah, with the weather today, it's difficult to imagine that there's no water in the river, but there's not a lot. Same with the Rhine. Is there also a role for EU, NATO, Romania to look at Moldova and to look at the infrastructure of Moldova? That's almost a political question. I'm going to ask it to you, Ben, because...
Well, I think we should be planning for the reunification of Transnistria into Moldova. I think that's a realistic expectation, especially as we look at post-conflict in Ukraine. I think it will be increasingly difficult for Russia to justify or even provide support to Transnistria. So what would be required there? Last year I had the chance to go with the Romanian General Staff and some others as part of the European American Security Dialogue on the great Romanian Navy river flotilla along the Danube. And we went past that part. It's about 400 meters, I think, of Moldova that touches the river there. And then there's Ukraine, and it was fascinating. So you see the potential that's there, but that potential never gets developed if there's not a strategic vision for what it is you're trying to accomplish. Building a bridge just because it makes life a little easier for the locals, no government's going to invest in that, not in a serious piece of infrastructure. But if it's part of a vision of linking Constanta and the Danube and canals to the interior of Europe for commercial purposes, then I think the Parliament gets behind that, and they're willing to put money in that. And then builders are willing to say, all right, I want some of that.
Yeah. And in the end, military mobility is all about prevention of conflict, I think. Cătălin.
Yeah. I want to add up a bit as, let's say, completion a bit of what's happening now. I agree with Ben that General Ben HODGES that EU shouldn't give us money for anything. But what I want to emphasize that even though we have a lot of delays in infrastructure, I believe that in the past 2 years we had a lot of investment going, initiated, contracts signed. And not only that, we see a lot of infrastructure starting to being built. Some of them it's progressing very fast. This is happening now. And moreover, to the funding, maybe this will be a solution that will be very interesting for our, let's say, not only government to approach. We have another source. Nowadays in the world, there's a lot of money in hedge funds, mutual funds that are, I believe, a bit desperate to be invested because they are lowering their value. So I believe that when the government presents the format or the opportunity, the private investor will come and they'll put their money there if they know they'll have a return even in time. So
That's, by the way, that's quite classic. Governments lending money to build stuff.
Not lending money. For example, even for the military infrastructure, I had a discussion, very interesting discussion, with two represented equity funds that are for many years in Romania, and they say, okay, we are building all this, we are bringing all these troops are coming here, we are building facilities. What about the accommodation, the housing, schools for all these troops? Moreover, that they are used to a certain level of living. So they said that if there will be a format, they will be willingly to invest their money, buy the land, build us at a certain level of requirements, and provide this without the government putting the money there. So I believe this will be a solution for many things that we have to build.
Basically what you're saying is that we have to get more creative.
All the time.
Yeah, all the time, yeah. What's interesting that I don't hear the industry talking about disruption of the supply chains. And I read it all the time. Roland, yeah, we still have 15 minutes. And if you have a question, please raise your hand.
If I can react to that, the disruption of supply lines, I was looking at my watch to see if you want to spend all day talking about that, because it has a big effect. If I look at our operations worldwide, there was a big effect on the supply chains. You know, we've all seen the picture of the Ever Given blocking the Suez Channel. I was at a conference with the Royal Netherlands Navy on Tuesday, where that photo was shown in every session by several people who did presentations. Anyway, it has a big effect. You know, the steel prices going up and down. I think the same goes for construction material going up and down. It's almost impossible to give a fixed price for a contract these days. Almost impossible to give a fixed delivery time these days. And that's again why cooperation in all transparency with government is essential. That people in government realize what we're facing, that the government realize that even if they put a contract like this with industry, if industry doesn't have the material, if industry doesn't have, then they cannot perform, and that's what people should
maybe
realize.
work with open calculation.
Absolutely.
In the end, I mean,
and that's what we do.
Yeah, I know, but we should do it not only with ships, but a lot of more stuff we need.
Absolutely.
I've got a question over here.
We are discussing the situation in a special part of Europe that has some specific structural constraints, because we know that, for instance, the traffic to Bosphorus and Dardanelles is regulated by the Montreal Convention, and we can risk investing a lot of money into an infrastructure that we will not be able to use during a conflict situation, namely due to those structural constraints. What do you think about because we know that according to the Montreal Convention, in a situation of crisis or war, there are some constraints on the traffic through the Bosphorus and Dardanelles for the ships that have some military purposes. So how are we going to solve this issue in case of a crisis emerging there, and this infrastructure being needed for specific purpose, for supply of armed forces involved in the operations and so on and so on?
We started about logistics, and now we're hitting the real geopolitics here. Yeah, what about facilities on the Black Sea coast if you can't reach the Black Sea from the Mediterranean? That's how I translate your question.
Well, first of all, unless our Turkish ally says no warships from anybody can come into the Black Sea, of course we can reach the Black Sea. Even within Montreux, 21 days, certain type of ships from non-riparian or non-littoral states. Cargo ships obviously can pass through the straits to bring in materials or to get things. So remember, a lot of this, we're talking about deterrence, not in the middle of a fight, but deterrence. And so being able to move things in and out of there. The Montreux Convention actually is not much of a limitation. The United States Navy doesn't even use half of its available days, if you will. We haven't, the Navy doesn't have the resources to do everything, and until now the Black Sea has not been enough of a priority to try and get more ships into the Black Sea. Now, candidly, Turkey, Romania, and Bulgaria, the 3 NATO countries on the Black Sea, should be doing a lot more to enforce freedom of navigation. They allowed the Russian Black Sea Fleet to do pretty much what it wanted. That was wrong. But I think the United States, the British Royal Navy, the Royal Netherlands Navy, and others could be doing more. But that would have to be driven by a strategy. But you still make a good point that obviously, as we've watched the last 6 months, seaports and airports could be vulnerable to missile strikes. And so we have to, integrated air missile defense would be a part of this as well, protecting Constanta, protecting MK from Russian cruise missiles.
One can't go without the other, love and marriage, but also having infrastructure and protecting it. Because what we see, and I already mentioned St. HIMARS, if even with the Russian weapons being only 60% effective, 60% is still a lot. 60% is still a lot. And that's a question I also don't have an answer on. We are speaking about dispersed operations, dispersed logistics, because we know once you have logistics in one location, you're vulnerable, and they'll find you and they'll destroy you within 1 hour. I haven't figured out for myself the idea of dispersed infrastructure. Movable bridges or something like that, I'm not sure, but we have to think about that. Don't put all our eggs in the same basket. On the other hand, if there is the money and both Adrian and Cătălin can start building the stuff, then we can also make sure that we don't build everything in the same location. I hope. More questions? No more questions? Fine. Then we'll talk on. Because I think during the last hour we see a theme emerging, and that is cooperation on a different level, a different way than we used to do that. And people might say that's against European regulations. It's not, and not only Article, 342, for specific military material, but for anything you buy as a government, a lot is possible, and maybe we should use these possibilities more, helping improve military mobility. That doesn't mean there is not still a lot to be done at that level. Our Dutch troops joined the battle group here in Romania, and sending the stuff away from the Netherlands was no problem. They were very welcome here and really helped arriving here, but I can tell you on the road between the Netherlands and Romania, there was still a lot of barriers, and not only the Danube River being too low on the water, because we didn't use that one, but still the legal difficulties. If and I'm going a bit rounding up. If there's one thing you would like to do that we would need to start with, I'm going to pose that question to all 4 of you to improve construction, improve military mobility, improve the use of the own Romanian facilities here. What would that be? Adrian.
Well, tough question, right? Sorry? Tough question.
Yeah.
I'm from the civilian side, and in the times of war, I think that dream that says, let's have civilian and military working together would need to come true. We had recently a bridge that went down immediately after opening. That was not done by Army engineers. we had other parts of the new infrastructure that went down because the strategy was the lowest price wins. So these two together, we need to trigger something. I do salute what Cătălin says. Cooperation is possible if there is a strategy attached to it. This is what Ben said. Guys, focus on something. Number one. Number two, this continuous chase, which is political for some reason, of who builds first. And that happens usually in the counties. You know, Romania has 40 counties. Every county has its own president or something. They have to go there and say, we did it. We are not in that game. We have the war at our doorsteps. And we cannot play and fool around with who does first and how cheap it was and how many budgets we saved. So it is possible. And I would truly believe that military has a role in changing that. Now is their time.
Ben?
So I think this cooperation, the key for Romanian infrastructure development, the key for Constanta and MK and all of this growing and for the region benefiting is for cooperation between the two ends of this inter-European transportation network. I think Rotterdam and Hamburg are not terribly interested in seeing Constanta become a big port, because if Constanta does become that big hub, then ships coming from, say, Africa or the Middle East go there. It actually becomes quicker to move product into the heart of Europe versus going around to Rotterdam or Hamburg and then coming back in. So I could understand, so I'm not naive. So within the European Union and in Romania, being able to help make the case that everybody will benefit from this development, that Rotterdam is not the big loser, but that everybody will benefit. Now that may be a hard sell, but I think without getting the union behind it and put investment and also addressing the regulatory requirements, it will be an uphill climb to get the improved infrastructure that Romanians need and that, frankly, NATO needs for improved deterrence on the Black Sea region.
If really national interests like that would decide the outcome of what we need to defend Europe, then I would be really pessimistic, and I'm an optimist in the end. Cătălin.
So, not to repeat myself, or to repeat what Ben and Adrian said before me, I will want to emphasize another aspect. I believe that even in this meeting, I heard a lot of great ideas, great concepts, what has to be done. But even now, the title of this is strategic. I believe, and because we are, let's say, in a military environment, I think that another important aspect, which is kind of in the direction of cooperation, is when we speak strategically, to assure with concrete action that on tactical and operational level, everything functions. And take that from the military and on a, let's say, governmental level, I believe when we have a strategy, because we have a strategy, to ensure that we put in place down the ladder, the other levels are functioning. Because I think a lot of good things, good ideas, good intention get stuck because on a grass level, things are not happening. And somebody afterwards make a, how it's called, a meeting, a work group, and say, we had a good idea, it doesn't work. Nobody knows why, because you don't have the transparency, they don't get what's happening on ground level. So I believe we should act upon that, find the ways, because it's not so complicated, to be sure that good ideas are implemented on tactical and operational level.
And maybe not make it a project. You know, if you have a project, you have a defined outcome, and if you don't get that outcome, then the project is lost. I was totally wrong. Maybe we should have a program with 100 different ideas floating around and being tried. And then if you have 25 not succeeding but 75 working, then the program is a success. Roland.
Yeah, probably from all of us here in the panel, this question is easiest for me to answer, because what should be done is something we're already doing. We have the infrastructure, we have a big facility on the Black Sea coast in Mangalia, specifically designed for building and repair. And what we're planning to do is because the facility qualifies for defense security, is to set up like a service hub for sustainment of military ships. So yeah, it is for us, I wouldn't say easy, but it is something that is in line with the strategy of the company. It is in line with what we can do in Mangalia, and it is what we're going to do.
Even not being family, I would say it's a no-brainer. I promised Israel to round up in time on this forum, and I've got 1 minute. The feeling I have after our discussions is the Nike slogan: just do it, start it. I mean, get together, military, people of the MOD, people of industry, have a good dinner as a start, and try experimenting. And anyone who's interested in that, Roland will surely be able and willing to share the ideas how they do that with the Navy. I'm more than happy to tell you what we did with the Army. I've got, yeah, no, I promised to round up. You had your chance. Sorry. Otherwise, no. No, I'm more than happy to tell you what we did with the Army. I've got a 1.5 hour presentation about that one, if you're interested. And if you're interested in what the Air Force did, I have the contacts, and I'm more than happy to share them with you. I would like to thank the panel for the participation in this panel, for agreeing with the format I forced on them yesterday night. And for me, it worked, and I really liked it. Thank you very much for your participation, and thanks to the audience for your attention. And let's keep in contact. Thank you very much.